Hello, fellow Star Trek fans. Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Clonestar Podcast. Now, we are continuing with our series Voyager at 30 celebration of interviews. And this week, we are delighted to welcome back the legendary Dan Curry. Dan was a senior member of the special and VFX teams and served as visual effects supervisor on TNG, as well as VFX producer on the entire runs of DS9, Voyager, and Enterprise. A winner of 7 Emmy Awards for his work on Star Trek is, well, quite a ridiculous feat. Dan, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Dan, at this point, we're talking about Voyager here, and obviously we've had you on before and things like that. When was it the first time that you heard of Voyager as a show being kind of mentioned in kind of, Star Trek circles?
Probably about the 5th season of Next Generation.
And who kind of brought it up? Was it kind of did it come direct from Rick Berman or Mike Piller, or who did it come
just, I guess, general crew chatter, and then as Deep Space Nine was in progress and kind of reaching its conclusion, that's when Voyager became a very serious prospect on the horizon. So everybody was really excited because we would continue to be employed and not have to steal a shopping cart and move under a bridge.
Oh, the life of working in TV.
Dan, that was another question I wanted to ask. I know this is going to sound completely ridiculous, like you work in the industry, I don't. When, say, you work on TNG, DS9, same time we're going on all that, and when reference to a new Star Trek series was kind of being mentioned, did you automatically assume that you'd be working on it? Was that kind of like how it was going to work? Or was there ever any doubt going, oh, good Lord, they're going to do a new Star Trek series, I might be on it, I might not? Or how did it go kind of?
Well, there was no assumption that we would automatically be reemployed, but the assumption was there. They seemed to like what we were doing, and we finally learned how to produce the shots on budget, and so I think that helped us. And there was a big learning curve for all the people on the VFX team to do the work. So it seemed rational to continue with us, and that's how it worked out.
And in terms of, again, we were going to be going into the world of, say, a Federation starship and things like that, and a completely new design and things like that. In terms of, say, what you had been working on, what you developed in terms of, say, technology, in terms of VFX shots and all that, what were some of your immediate initial thoughts in terms of, say, okay, if we're going to do this, here's how we're going to approach it differently and things like that? Or did you say, no, what we're doing works, we're going to stick with that? Because as you said, the most important words there, you were coming in under budget, coming in on time and things like that, which is obviously music to producers' ears.
Well, the big challenge is they wanted some new capabilities, and one of them was getting Voyager to have the wings move. And in that time period, that was a big deal. And because getting physical models to do that. So we got Tony Meininger, the great model maker who also built Deep Space Nine. Tony built also the engine room for Titanic. And so he got from NASA these incredible micro chains to put inside the model's wings. And the model was only about 4 feet long, and being able to control them by motion controls, because for each shot where a ship flies by, you need to shoot it a minimum of 7 times doing exactly the same thing. One to obtain the silhouette, one to obtain the beauty pass, one for the windows, and whatever. And so Tony was able to rig that inside the ship, and which now with CG, that would be nothing difficult, but in those days that was a chore. And the other thing we did is I got tired of looking at our spaceships with windows as just being white windows. And so for the bigger windows on the model, I went around the sets and took slides and gave the slides to Tony Meininger and had him build little tiny cycloramas inside each of the windows that were clear. And so that when we would do a close flyby with the ship, it would be you would see a little parallax in the sense of an interior, and they were
Yep.
the real interiors of made from our sets. And and one of the things I was very proud of is creating the title sequence for Voyager with a great theme by Jerry Goldsmith. And the thing that was fun with that, it's a hybrid of technology. CG was just beginning to come into its own. And so we got Santa Barbara Studios to do the CG work for us. But it's also got motion control models. It's also got even hand painted, like one of the planets in the title sequence is a planet I painted on a disc of cardboard and shot it on the motion control rig. And if you look at this,
It's amazing sometimes how the most low-tech approach has the
it's a mixture of high tech and low tech. And if you look at the shot behind me where the Voyager goes through and you see all this gas turbidity, that almost didn't make it into the title sequence. One of the executive producers, when I first screened the sequence for him, it was he declared it was beyond loathing and wanted it removed. And we were pretty much out of time anyway, so I rounded up a bunch of people in the office and they all looked at it together and said, well, what do you think? And they all loved that shot. So reluctantly, he kept it in.
Dan, to say now,
isn't it?
yeah, exactly. But like Dan, to say it's beyond loathing is like it's a bit much for like something that lasts like 2-3 seconds on screen. Like what was his massive affront to it?
I would never dare to explain his sense of aesthetics.
Actually, I like what you said about when Voyagers and the cells went up. I remember at the time hearing about that, and as you said, like it was such a big deal. Why was it a decision to kind of have them cells? If I remember correctly, at the time, I think it no, I could be totally wrong here. Did somebody say at the time it related to the Next Generation episode Force of Nature, where they couldn't go above warp 5 because that was damaging whatever the galaxy, and they were saying that nacelles going up would protect against that. Was that the rationale for it, or was it just a design choice to say this will look cool?
Well, you can always come up with a rationalization, but it was really to do something cool that we hadn't done before.
There's always someone that will come up with some in-universe explanation for something.
There was another thing in the pilot of Voyager. There was an area called the Badlands, which had fire tornadoes. And to show professional courtesy, our special effects supervisor, Dick Brownfield, had a friend who was the special effects guy on Backdraft, the Ron Howard movie with fire. And there was even at Universal Studios a Backdraft show in a big fireproof building. So one day, and Dick had mentioned that we wanted to photograph fire tornadoes. So the guy invited us over and showed us how they create that by baffling and having the fire generated and little metal wings that would shape the fire and create that vortex. And they didn't have to do that. We're a rival studio, but just out of professional courtesy, they taught us how to do that. And that's how we created those fire tornadoes for the Badlands with their technology. We just rebuilt their rigs on one of our sound stages.
And Dan, how did it come about then that you got the green light to do the title sequence? Like, did you look for it, or was it just something that was offered to you?
It was offered to me. The supervising producer, Peter Lauritsen, had been vice president of Paramount in charge of television post-production. I'd done a lot of title sequences for TV shows and Paramount features. And they they were happy with my work. So since I was already a title designer, I think I've done 118 feature films. Um, they they said, "Would you like to do this title sequence?" And I'd already done the Deep Space Nine title sequence, and they were happy with that. And that sequence, I wanted to do a ballet around the station. And this one, the producers were very busy, so I just imagined my dream of space travel, what I'd like to see, and rounded up a great team of artists and to do different aspects of it. And that's how that came into existence.
And what were some of the kind of the inspirations for some of the shots? Was it just, as you said, almost like, in front of a better term, a lost in space kind of situation where it's just showing Voyager going across, going past different planets and things like that, and like just almost a call to adventure by kind of seeing where we could go?
Well, what I'd seen stuff I saw as a kid, what I'd like to see in my dreams, and Santa Barbara Studios, the reason we hired them to help on the title sequence was that they had done an educational documentary, and one of their shots was a shot of sweeping by the rings of Saturn. And I said, that's really cool. We need to have something like that in Voyager. And the actual title card I hand airbrushed onto paper, glued it onto a piece of glass, and did a front light backlight matte to obtain it. So it's got really old tech too.
Mike, that's right up your street now, the old new tech and old tech blending together in that situation.
So just whilst we're on this the kind of title sequence, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, there was a guy on YouTube who meticulously recreated the entire intro sequence in 4K. Have you seen that at all? If not, I'll have to see.
I've seen one that somebody sent me, and it turned out to have a sad ending. I said, "You're immensely talented. You certainly know the technology. Why not do something of your own and show your personal vision and creativity?" And sadly, this young man got very angry at me and said I created a bad memory for him by suggesting that.
Oh, cheapers above. Worse. Mike, hopefully that's not the same guy that you've seen the video of now, because that will not be a good memory to revisit.
Because I think the first one he did DS9, so he did the DS9 title sequence, completely from scratch in 4K. Obviously had to put in a lot of extra details because the details just weren't physically there on the originals, and then he did Voyager. So, but yeah, I just thought it was. How does that make you feel, though, that people are recreating the stuff that you've created?
I'm amazed that people would bother to do that. So it just surprised me.
Because I know sometimes some people get a bit confrontational with it. They get a bit, "How dare you kind of recreate my work?" Because I know of some people that are a bit like that.
Like protective, Mike, is it?
Yeah, they're very protective about it. But then I've always thought if someone was to copy my work, I'd always find it a bit humbling, or recreate my work, I should say.
Yeah, the only time I would have a negative attitude about it is if they claim they did it.
Yeah, or they absolutely butchered it.
Oh, they're allowed to butcher it, but just don't say you created it.
Yeah, I think you have to make sure.
And as far as the title sequence goes, kudos to David Stipes and the team at Image G for shooting the physical models, and Santa Barbara Studios for their CG work, and that great score that gives it majesty.
That score as well, because it's always that shot that you've got behind you. When it goes through, they've just added in that little sprinkling of, I don't know what instrument it is, but there is that little kind of almost like high-pitched bells that plays on in the background as almost if it's, dust being reflected off the whole. Which I just thought it's the little touches like that make the biggest difference, I think.
And that's what makes a great composer.
Yes.
So Dan, in terms of then say with the title sequence, like obviously, how would I put it? Do you make the design in terms of all the visuals and then pass it off to the composer, or is there any communication between you and the composer in terms of how this is going to go?
Sometimes there's intense communication, and sometimes not so much. And in the case of Voyager, not so much. I didn't hear the music um, until the composite was done and the sound department put it on top. In cases like I have a fond memory of the Rodney Dangerfield movie Back to School, where uh, for features, normally the title designer will have the music or the composer will have the visuals. And in this case, the great Danny Elfman and I started on the same day, and we had, uh, and I was asked to create a biography of Rodney Dangerfield's character from age 12 to age 55. And by a fluke, I grew up in the same neighborhood in New York that Rodney's character was supposed to have grown up in. And so I took old family photographs. And in those days, we had no Photoshop. So I would make large prints and in oils paint Rodney's face over my father's face. And
Oh my
and
word.
in order to sync with the music, I went over to Danny Elfman's house, and he played the theme on the keyboard and said, "This is what I have in mind." And he asked me if I could read music, and I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, all right." He gave me a copy of the keyboard music and said, "Let's go 15 frames a beat." So I look at the music, and where I'd see a glissando or uh, a pause or whatever was going on musically, I would determine the edits by that. So I took a piece of clear leader and made all those marks mathematically, and then took the shots I'd done moving over still shots and made the edits to go where it looked like likely places to be on the with the visuals related to the music. And we when we went to when we finally put it together and screened it, we both were laughing because it worked first time.
Oh, brilliant.
And neither of us thought there was a prayer it would work.
Guys, would you give me just 1 second? I need to just quickly use the bathroom. Is that okay? Just for 1 second. Mike will obviously edit out that I'm going to the bathroom.
Absolutely. Tell you what, just talking about using slides on the models.
Yeah.
Bill Krause, the model maker, does exactly the same thing on his Starship models.
Well, that's great. It's a lot better than a white flat window that looks like a milkplex.
Yeah, exactly. I'm wondering if that's where he got the idea from, because
Oh, you have to ask him.
yeah, we interviewed him a little while ago, but I keep in contact with him because one of the things I want to do this year is Revel, the model maker kit, made a model of Voyager, and I bought it 12 years ago, and it has sat in a cupboard for 12 years, and I've never touched it. But I have decided that this year I'm going to build it, but it doesn't. The paints that it's referencing don't exist anymore. So I'm quizzing Bill about what paints to use because he did an incredible Voyager model about 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah, some of the model makers that just made them did astonishing jobs. There was a company in the UK, Eagle Moss, that did
Yep.
very small Star Trek models, and they're
I
exquisite. They're among the most beautifully made I've seen.
Well, I have Voyager. There she is. That will be this one.
Here we go. Well, here's something you might find interesting. To do storyboards, I noticed the resemblance between Voyager and a spoon. And I took a plastic spoon, turned it upside down, cut it off, and took the scrap pieces and made the engines on it. And I'd use that little spoon flying around to decide how I would storyboard sequences.
Yeah, because one of the ones I struggled for years to find, and I really did struggle, was the Delta Flyer. And I finally, about 3 or 4 months ago, I finally found Eagle Moss's Delta Flyer model. It's been
Yes.
one of the ones I've been trying to tap. It's so popular that it always sells out. It was sold out years ago, and no one sells them because they're so hard to come by.
Yeah, it's a beautiful model. I think Rick Sternbach may have designed that. I forget.
I think Rick did do that one.
We've been
Yeah,
trying to get Rick on the
wonderful artist.
we've been trying to get Rick on the show for absolutely ages, but he's always so busy we can just never seem to properly get a hold of him. I only messaged him last week, but he said he's busy at the minute, and all that kind of thing. Dan, can I ask you a quick question? Can I ask you a question, Dan? In terms of, say, like after designing the title sequence, as you said, what was your reaction when you sat down for the first time to see the title sequence and hear the music all put together?
Um, well, that was I was pretty excited, and I should say it's like all cinematic or most cinematic creations, it was a team sport, so it was a collaborative effort. Um, so without having great artists working with me, it would not have been what it was. But yeah, I remember I felt when I heard Jerry's score, I felt uh, in awe of it because it's when you add that element of music, it's it suddenly transforms kind of what might be perceived as cold images into something that is very emotionally powerful.
Hmm. Like I was listening to a book, autobiography of, oh Lord, I can't think of his name. The guy who edited Paul Hirsch, that's it. And he was saying when he would be editing movies and things like that, he'd have a temp track laid down because in terms of like just being able to have something to listen to and all that. When you were creating this title sequence, did you have a temp track in your own head in terms of what the music might sound like as you were putting it together, or none at all?
None at all. I was just worried about getting it done on time and getting cool images. And I just trusted that one of our great composers, whether it was Jay, Dennis, or Jerry, would do something magnificent. And so it was just an assumption on my part that the music would be great.
So Voyager premiered in '95. So this you would have been working on this in '94 and things like that then as well. So we're obviously coming towards the end of the model era and kind of moving slightly towards the CGI era and things like that. Did you think that when you were designing Voyager and getting everything ready, did you think it would be it's going to be models for however long this is going to be on, or did you think CGI is going to be coming soon? We're going to have to integrate that at some point as well.
Well, we knew that CGI was going to be the wave of the future, but it was, we went into it with uh, trepidation because CG images, when they first began to be used, were not that convincing. You could tell that there were textures stretched over the shape. And we started to get into CGI with we did a couple of CGI things on Next Generation, the crystalline entity, for example. Then we got more into it with Deep Space Nine as they kept writing bigger and bigger space battles. There was no way we could physically accomplish shooting the shots we needed. So we began doing hybrid shots. There was a fan favorite space battle from Sacrifice of Angels. And so what we did is shot the foreground ships, which would be getting the most visual attention from the audience as physical models. And then the background ships, which would be less noticeable, would be CG, so we could get them all done.
So at what point did Voyager kind of move more into the CGI world then? Like what kind of season did you really kind of just kind of push it more rather than using physical models?
The later, the more CG it was. But when we did, for example, uh, the show where Voyager is stranded on the planet, um, Basics Part 1 and 2, I had a good time designing the creature, the cave creature that ate Dennis
Oh,
Madelon.
yes.
Um,
Yeah.
and But when we were out on location in Lone Pine in the Alabama hills, where more than half the westerns shot were were located, um, and we laid out how big we knew the dimensions of Voyager, so we laid out with measuring tapes how big the Voyager would be to make sure that where it was landed, there would be actual room for it to fit there. And we were amazed at how big it was. And I had maybe 20 to 30 extras. And so we shot them like pieces of pie, taking a rope from the camera and marking off and just having them reshuffle themselves and move to different spots. And by compositing it together, it made the Voyager big enough that they would properly surround the Voyager. And we did something similar on the 37s, where they find Amelia Earhart in Bronson Canyon in Griffith Park.
It's interesting that, like, one of the things when you talk about Voyager, then you always call it the Voyager. And I remember in the show as well, they started off calling it that, and then they just dropped the word "the" at the start of it, and they just
Humanize
started
it.
to say Voyager after that and things like that.
Yeah, we formally dropped the in Enterprise.
Yes, that's absolutely right as well. And like one of the things as well, like, we take a lot of stuff for granted in terms of say, what's achievable now in CGI and all that. One of the big things outside of obviously Voyagers and the cells lifting as well was the fact that this ship could actually land on a planet as well. And this was going to be a huge deal, watching Voyager land on a planet for the very first time. How did you kind of approach that situation when you were doing the VFX for it?
We try to support what the script was trying to accomplish. His story is king. And so one of our rules was that the visual effects should always serve the story and move it from the first frame to the last frame. The story has somehow been advanced and the audience has new information.
And in terms of things, say, like with the visual effects and all that kind of thing, as we were saying earlier on, was there, like, how did you try and make, obviously, look, as you said, story is king and things like that. Was there any different approaches you wanted to take with Voyager that would have been different to, say, DS9 or the next gen?
Yeah, we had extended feet so that it could land, and so we'd see the mechanical feet to it. And when, say, for basics, when we had the Voyager on the ground, when we shot the physical model, since the terrain in the Alabama Hills is kind of tan, the color of brown wrapping paper, we put brown wrapping paper a couple of feet under the Voyager model, so it would have a reflected light that would be appropriate for the terrain it was in.
So on that model, was that can't have been an entirely new model with just feet. I'm guessing they were bits that just kind of bolted on, or it
Yeah,
sat.
Tony Meininger made the feet and made little ports that cut little ports into it that the feet could go in.
And are you saying then the seed or the actual model that you used, Dan, for filming, was that just a 4-foot model? That was the biggest model of Voyager that you had, is that right?
Yeah, that was the biggest one we had, yeah.
And so in terms of, say, as you started kind of moving away from CG or from models into CGI, how did you kind of approach that, Dan? Were you kind of saying to yourself, like, how are we going to do that? Because as you said, like, and I think as we discussed before when you were on the show, is that you correctly pointed out, like, with the advent of, say, Jurassic Park in '93, everybody started trying to push CGI long before it was ready. And obviously one of Star Trek's biggest kind of compliments is how well it's kind of produced its kind of special effects, how it produced its look and all that kind of thing. Where did you kind of say, okay, we've got to introduce this, but we've got to do this in the right way so it doesn't look cheap?
Well, just did the best we could.
Was there any pressure higher up then to start moving away from the models, or was that completely your call in terms of when you wanted to kind of start saying we're going to phase this out, or was it down to budget and kind of delivering on time?
It was more of using the right tool for the job. As scenes got more elaborate, we started relying on it more, and as the image quality of CG got better. So with companies like Foundation Imaging, Digital Muse, and Santa Barbara Studios. They had great model makers, and so uh, we trusted them, and we would spend a lot of time working with them, making sure the CG was something we wanted to see, and we would. I like to do my own visual effects storyboard, so I would sit with the artist and say, "Here's what it needs to do. Here's why." And one of my theories was think about where the audience's eyes are for just the last frame of the shot that would precede a visual effect shot, so that if one of our characters was talking, the audience would be looking at their face. I remember doing one for Next Generation where a Klingon ship was supposed to attack the Enterprise, and I made sure that the entrance of the when we cut to the Klingon ship was exactly where Patrick Stewart's head was, so that the shock, the visual shock, would be more powerful. So that was it was just trying to satisfy the needs of the script, and as we got more and more complicated in terms of the dynamics of a given shot, we began to rely on it more and more. And then, for example, I'll show you this.
I suppose the problem with CGI is that is the reason why they can't remaster Voyager and DS9.
Maybe. Here's one of the ones from the title sequence, and that's I think Santa Barbara Studios did that, but the one I wanted to show you, these are the night ships that we used, and so I did some sketches of it. The producers approved it, and then the great model maker Brandon McDougall made the physical models, and Brandon became a great luthier and violin maker, and now makes super high-tech drones. And my idea for this was that the crew would live in them almost like parasites, and the ships were actually living giant crustaceans that their crews would put armor on to protect them. So that's what this came from. And here's another one from Voyager. And these are the
Kazon.
The Kazon ships. And so I was inspired by the architecture of Lebbeus Woods, who had these really strange ideas for buildings and structures. So taking the cue from that. And this one, I wanted it to look kind of like a almost Jules Verne quality because of the kind of crude, primitive nature. And I'd already shot about $20,000 worth of shots, and then one of the executive producers wanted the nose, the down wing nose, shortened by 2 inches, so we did that and had to reshoot everything. And then we wanted a little bit more crudeness to it, so David Stipes, visual effects supervisor, he personally added the wings in the back. And so that's how that ship came into existence.
My word. What do you think were some of your kind of favorite designs then, Dan, outside of obviously the Kazon ship and Night ship and things like that? What are some of the other ones that you're really happy to have designed on your time on Voyager?
Well, the Kazon mothership too, and there's a shot in the pilot where the mothership comes in camera and you can see all the decks inside when it gets shot.
Yep.
Those decks were actually layers of corrugated cardboard.
There's your old tech and new tech again, Mike.
Yep.
The high tech and no tech and things like that then as well. Oh my word. And Dan, just in terms of say working with, like, in terms of what was the collaborative process like on Voyager in comparison to the other shows, or was it just the same in terms of how everybody worked
pretty
together?
much the same. How it would come is we'd get a script and start thinking about it. Then there would be a production meeting, and all the different departments were represented. There was a department head and one or two people. The writers were there, the directors were there, and the producers were there. And we'd review the script scene by scene. And then we'd go back to a budget, then have another meeting where the budget was discussed. And when the producers recovered from cardiac arrest after seeing the budget, we would decide on ways to hack it down and get it into a financially feasible range. And then we come back once more for how we're going to do it. And then there were location scouts. And so that's pretty much, and then if there were new designs, either the art department or I would design something, the producers would approve it. And so that was pretty much what we did on all the four series I worked on.
It's interesting. I was listening back to William Shatner's book on Star Trek Memories at the moment, and he was talking about like the budget that I think every original series episode's budget, I think the first two seasons was like 198,000, I think it was, and in the third season it was down to 178, I think it was, and things like that. And there was obviously the constant fights and things like that. Did you have to fight much for a budget on the show, Dan, or was it more a case of at this point, like Star Trek's a complete juggernaut, like as long as it's within reason, we can support it?
Yeah, well, occasionally I would go over budget significantly, and the studio would be very forgiving because they knew that eventually it would earn it
Balance it
back.
out.
And
Yeah.
they knew that in order to be viability for showing reruns, the production value had to be as good as possible.
And Dan, in terms of say what you're creating on, like again, this is more of a general question about Star Trek as well. Did you really were you all aware that like we're creating something really unique here, something that's going to stand the test of time? Because like you're creating something that's effectively in in the future, and that this has to kind of stand, that could stand for decades, centuries, that like in years to come, people are still going to look at it. And like, were you constantly kind of saying, we want to make sure, like, just even in general, the quality of your work had to consistently stand up to scrutiny and look really good on TV?
Well, I think everybody knew we were working on something greater than the sum of its parts, that it was a cultural phenomenon that touched people all over the world. And we all felt it was a privilege to have our work seen by millions of people every week. And so I thought that was kind of a big honor and an opportunity to be a part of that and to have influence over it. I think everybody was aware of it. We didn't talk about it much, occasional random conversation, because time was our biggest enemy, and we needed to get the shots done. Air dates were unforgiving, and so our goal was, we frequently just got lost in the intensity of the drive to get done.
What was the closest you ever came to missing a deadline?
A couple of hours.
Was that just a one-off now, Dan, or was that could that have happened a few times?
And not often, but occasionally there would be a reason to change something at the end, or one of the producers had an idea to change something and we had to scramble to do it. I think the biggest challenge was the finale of Deep Space Nine. We had 354 visual effects shots, including big space battles, and we had 3.5 weeks to do it. And so we wound up sleeping at the motion control stage.
Oh my God.
Oh my God, that's
How many times are you cursing script writers and producers at that point?
Well, actually, we never did, because we kind of thought it's cool and it's our job to meet these demands. So it was there was never a question about doing what it needed to be done. We wished we got overtime, but
Don't we all? Don't we all wish that we got overtime?
And Dan, there's always the, like you'd always hear the kind of stories about like getting notes from producers who don't understand it and all things. And I know you've mentioned Peter Lorreson's name a few times. Was the relationship with the producers really good in terms of, did they understand what was going on, or did you ever get notes going, this person doesn't know what the hell they're talking about?
Yeah, our relationship with the producers was really good. Peter is still a friend, and they They would explain what they wanted, but they pretty much gave us free rein. I think we had earned their trust, and I I was very pleased with things. I would not never heard them yell at anybody. Never heard them uh, be flex their power. Um, in times when they felt it was necessary, they would do. They had the authority to make something happen as they envisioned it. But I felt the relationship with the producers and writers was very good.
And just in terms of, say, obviously with Voyager, we're out in the Delta Quadrant. Everything is going to be completely brand new. Whereas in DS9, the next generation, we're going to have fairly similar things because by and large we'll come across races that we know and things like that. Did that give you a really good creative spark to say, George, every episode we could be creating something completely unique here?
Well, and were all excited about going to the Delta Quadrant because it was someplace we hadn't seen, so it was unfamiliar territory. So we were excited about having the possibility of creating new stuff that hadn't been done before and new cultures. So uh, uh, we were very excited about Voyager and the whole idea of the 75-year voyage to get home and how that's going to happen. And we were always delighted when, say, when John Delancey would come back and as Q. And so uh, I think it was just opportunity to do something new and cool.
But isn't there
So
always that kind of, it's a bit daunting knowing that you can't fall back on Klingons and Romulans and everything else. There is no fallback.
Um, it didn't affect us because we were just cranking out shots. That was more a writer's problem.
That's true.
Dan, in terms of them, say, as you said, when you'd get a copy of the script, and you'd have your first production meeting and all that, how long normally would you have then for a standard episode of Star Trek? How long would you kind of be told, right, that's how long you have to get everything done?
Well, we knew we could start working on uh, on an episode. We usually had maybe uh, a week or so to start thinking about it while we were finishing another episode. Then we had a week of prep. Then we would shoot for a week. Then we'd have second unit to do the stunts for the more complicated visual effect shots that they didn't have time to do on first unit. Um, and then we'd have between 2 and 3 weeks to crank out all the shots and cut them in.
And at this stage, then on Voyager, like was everything like the relationship between writers, producers, everyone was in such a good place that like you felt that you could do anything.
Yeah, that's fair. I think one of the things that they would do is they would have when they have a beat sheet, which is kind of a somewhat detailed outline, we'd have a meeting and uh, talk about shaping the visual effects to a doable point. Um, and and each department would do that. How many prosthetic makeup do we need for the makeup department? What the construction department would have to build? What models need to be built? Um, so we would start helping the writers shape the script to doability before they even wrote the first draft of the script based on a beat sheet. So we have an idea where the story was going to go.
And like, what would be a standard day? What time would you start? What time would you finish on a normal day?
It depended on the day of the week. We'd start at 7 a.m. Monday, and we had 10-hour days, but we'd always go over. So by Friday, we were starting at noon or 1 o'clock, and then we'd work late into the morning on Saturday.
What? Oh my God almighty. That must be punishing on everyone's home life in that situation, Dan.
What home life?
Yeah, and then motion control, since there were no time clocks, we just shoot till it would get done. So a a typical day would be 10 to 16 hours.
Oh my word. That is absolutely crazy stuff altogether. And then obviously you've had a good bit of work on the Klingon side of things and things like that. How did you want to kind of say further that on Voyager whenever you got a chance? Because obviously B'Elanna's character kind of gained in prominence. We were able to introduce some Klingon elements here and there and things like that. What did you want to do in terms of how you approached that?
Well, we started that with Worf on Next Generation and then continued on Deep Space Nine. And the Klingons in the original series were like Eastern European growlers with bushy eyebrows. And then the feature started with the crenellated foreheads. And Worf, when we had an episode where Worf was to inherit a bladed weapon, I invented the batleth for that, and so it was just carrying on. And if you remember the episode Barge of the Dead,
Yep.
where we go to the Klingon afterlife. Well, if you look at all the walls, they're actually based on photographs I took of the walls around on Irish farms. You know, there's beautiful slate walls that are so intriguingly interconnected. And the gate of Stavokor is actually a random gate on the grounds of Ashfield Castle.
Would you believe, Dan, I was actually at Ashford Castle on the weekend. I was going for a walk there with my dog. So isn't that
Well, you
just
probably saw that gate.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I did. And actually those slate walls as well. My fiance's family, they've got that all around their property as well. So I know all those kind of things well.
Yeah, I wish I could have afforded to stay there. But at the time, Roxanne Dawson, who played B'Elanna Torres, we shared a property line in one of the canyons, and Roxanne's house was on the other side of the creek. So so Roxanne needed batleth lessons, so we brought home a couple of rubber batleths to so she could become a master of the batleth. And I actually happen to have the rubber batleth. Have to reveal my disgusting office.
It's not that bad.
It's pretty bad. But this is the rubber batleth, and Roxanne has the other one that we used to go out and practice in my backyard.
Was she a fast learner then?
Very fast learner. And what's interesting is the rubber ones that they'd fight with, they have a very thin steel core, and then they're covered with rubber, so the actors wouldn't hurt each other. And then we had a couple of hero batleths here's one of the metal ones. This is batleth number 1.
Wow.
And something else that you may find interesting is that occasionally we would have we carried over the force field from the Enterprise and Next Generation to Voyager, and this is the force field.
No way.
And I shook it over a mirror at a 45-degree angle, and then using an old Mitchell Rackover camera, Gary Hutzel shot it and did different colors and different speeds. And I thought it would be interesting because it had such a random sparkle. So this served many purposes. It was the force field. We'd wrap it around the sphere, and that would be the force field. But we also used it if an enemy ship shot at us. Sometimes that would be the hit point. We just put that on for a few minutes and see the sparkle. And then
What is that? Is that like?
It's a Mylar cheerleader's pom pom, and I used it again for one of our little energy creatures that would flutter around. And sometimes I just do that by hand and not even put it on a motion control rig. I just wear black clothes in front of a black drape and shake it like this.
Oh, do you know what? These are the stories I love, where you really have to kind of think super outside of the box to come up with a solution for a problem, and I love that.
Dan,
Cheerleaders pom pom.
there's
I'm
got to
just
be
making
more
some
of
stuff
these.
up.
There's got to be more of these low tech ideas you had for Voyager.
We would use it on Next Generation, sometimes Deep Space Nine, Voyager. We would wrap the physical model with black wrap, a kind of a heavy black aluminum foil, and then just spread out steel wool. And the steel wool, so it's a very thin layer of it. And then that way we'd be able to use the same motion control data. And then by lighting a spot on the steel wool, the
Yeah.
oil on the steel wool burns out
Yep.
in a beautiful concentric pattern. And by speeding it up, that would be the reaction to be getting shot by, say, a Kazon ray.
Oh my gosh.
And
Actually, that's a
liquid
really
nitrogen
clever
was
idea. I would never have thought of to do that.
Liquid nitrogen was one of our best friends. We could use it for all sorts of things, rifts in the time-space continuum. I remember for one shot, we built took some big cardboard tubes about 3 feet in diameter, covered them with black velvet, put some vacuum cleaners underneath and some lights, and then dribbled liquid nitrogen from two rain gutters on the side. And because it's heavier than air, it and the vacuum cleaners suck the liquid
Put it down.
nitrogen down, and the lights underneath, and it just looked really strange with all the turbidity and stuff. And there was one episode of Enterprise where we had to clean a planet of Next Generation, rather, where we had to clean a planet's atmosphere, and we built a 4 by 4 foot, 6 inch deep vat lined with velvet, filled it with liquid nitrogen. I would just swat it with a piece of cardboard, and it would separate and then come back together in these beautiful waves. And then by taking a vacuum cleaner, it would suck the liquid nitrogen up and use that for like cleaning off the surface atmosphere. And I wound up reusing some of those elements on Michael Jackson's music video, Black or White, when Michael is going through new realities. I use that for the wipe elements.
So what you're saying is if you want to get into VFX, you need velvet,
Cardboard.
liquid nitrogen, and a vacuum cleaner.
And also, baking soda is really good, where you can use it for solar ejecta by throwing it and shooting it at very high speed, knocking it up through a hole in black cardboard.
This is glorious. This is fantastic stuff.
I can
Well,
just
yeah,
imagine
fun.
you just spend days in the office going, right, we need an effect for something. What going to, and just randomly trying the most bizarre things that you can find to kind of see what works.
Well, there was one story not related to Voyager, but we at TNG we needed a brown mottled mining planet, and the and we had macro shots of rocks. We had photographs from NASA of satellites, and we would wrap them around a primitive device called a Sony System G, which could take a flat image and wrap it around a partial sphere. And I didn't like anything. We're sitting in the edit bay putting shots together. So one of my colleagues went in the back room and threaded up a piece of negative on the machine and to take a look at this. So I looked at it and said, that's brown and mottled. And we put a weather system over it. It'll be pretty good. What is that? And he said, well, I'm not going to tell you. I said, no, what is that? I won't say. So then I asked the editor to unwrap it so I could look at it. And if you took toothpaste and put it in your hand and pulled it up, there'd be little spiky formations.
Yeah.
And looking closer, I began to discern kernels of undigested corn, and the giveaway was a Nike logo imprint from a sneaker. And he admitted that he was getting out of his car and planted his foot in something that had been a canine supper. And he happened to have a macro lens on the still camera on the seat next to him. So he took a still of it, and that became a planet in 7 episodes. We nicknamed it Ficus Canis. And
So So when they literally
And
say this planet is shit, it quite literally is.
well, you can't say we didn't do shit that day. And and at one of the production meetings, uh, uh, we were talking about some exotic effect, and the director said, "Well, how are you going to do that, Dan?" I said, "Ah." And the executive producer said, "Don't tell us. Don't tell anyone." And everybody laughed, and I had no idea what he was talking about. So he slid a copy of TV Guide over, and I opened to the marked page, and that story is in TV Guide.
Oh. Like I remember reading about like oh Lord, why can't I think of his name? Who does all the Ben Burt, that's it, who did all the like sound
Star
design
Wars.
for
Yeah.
Lucasfilm and all that kind of thing, and he was just explaining the random things he'd come up with, like, and it's the exact same, Dan, as you said. It's just almost like how like anything can be something else if you just have a creative mindset to kind of be able to imagine it and say, I can do this.
Well, I think it's also important that as children you play with physical toys. That's what I'm worried about upcoming generations, because one of a lot of uh, the really great visual effects guys like Dennis Muir um, and they all played with toys as kids. And so uh, by playing with toys, you imagine your own story. You use things to be what they're not, and so you learn to look at the world and look at objects in it, not for what they are, but what they could be, and look at them in a way that it's unrelated to their original purpose and their scale. So, like on one of the episodes where you had to rescue somebody from a space lifeboat, and I just put a little dome on a piece of a little plastic device to fix sprinkler systems, and glued a couple of random plastic parts on it, and it would look great on screen.
It's like my godson when he was younger, he used to play with Lego, but like he just have a massive box of Lego and he just build his own things all the time. Like he wouldn't be building like what the box would say. He just go out and say, it's going to build something myself. Like, and he was showing me a car he designed for the Joker once, and it was absolutely glorious. Like it wasn't based on anything, it was just his own imagination. And he said, "This is what I want to build."
Yeah, when I was a kid, I was always insulted if somebody gave me a paint by numbers or gave me a model kit, because I just want to make my own.
Yep.
And then as time went by on Voyager and things like that, did you feel that you started getting even more creative in terms of what you were doing in terms of design? Because obviously, the further we got into the series, the more kind of like, I suppose, say, your weird and wonderful Voyager started to become. There was a lot more ideas. There were a lot more kind of really unique episodes and planets visited, alien species encountered, and things like that. Did you find this is the most creative we've ever had to be on a Star Trek show up until this point?
Um, Yeah, we just wanted to better ourselves. We always wanted to explore new things, do it in a new way. Didn't want to constantly repeat ourselves, which we had to
Mm.
do for, stock shots. So that's it. Behind me is another matte painting for Blink of an Eye, which was also based on Ireland, and you might even be able to recognize it. So I we built a partial set. Richard James, the production designer, and a lot of the extensions were just blending in photographs I took. And in this case, this is the medieval period of the culture that lived on that planet.
Wow, there's so much, as we said before, Dan, when you were on, there's so much Irish kind of historical sites that are in episodes of Star Trek that you just would not realize that there are at all.
Yeah, and there was an Iron Age fort that we used in the same episode. I don't have a picture of that, and but yeah, Ireland is part of it, and especially because of Kate Mulgrew's uh, Irish relationship. Uh, it was She really thought it was fun that we used a lot of Ireland in our imagery.
I think that's something that the industry has lost as a whole is matte paintings. It's amazing matte when you see the matte paintings sort of out of context. It's amazing the amount of work that goes into them, and it's something that just doesn't exist anymore, which I think is a bit of a shame.
Yeah, well, before the computer, there were very few people that did matte paintings in the world, and I was the 15th member of the Matte Artists Union.
15th
And
member.
yeah, and in order to get into the union, you had to go. There were three great masters: Albert Whitlock, Peter Ellenshaw, and Matthew Urisic. And you would go into the union hall, and they would uh, interview you for about an hour, ask you questions about photography, painting, what medium do you like. And you had to bring in 5 original paintings that were not matte paintings, and then they would grill you for a while, and then if you met with their approval, you got in. So I was number 15. Here's another matte painting. This is Mizenhead as the entrance to the Bajoran fire caves. So in Photoshop, I just painted in those statues and made it look a little bit more formal. And so thank you, the guards at Mizenhead, for letting me in after hours and becoming part of Star Trek Legend. And here's a little walkway that I put in, roll over this way.
Unbelievable stuff, like glorious. And Dan, as the years went by, did you kind of like look back, like say, how would I say it? Which era did you prefer, the model making and matte painting era, or the CGI era?
Well, put it this way: the model making era took way more time, was more physically grueling, but in some ways it was more fun. It was like medieval alchemy. And then as CG became better, the shots looked better. We could do anything. There were no physical limitations, especially with water simulation as a possibility. But it became creative in a different way. But gone were the days of. I remember for a movie called Pure Luck, making a waterfall out of dumping 10 pounds of 20 Mule Team Borax soap powder over a cliff of crumpled aluminum foil at 185 frames per second, and it looks absolutely real in the movie.
And Dan, what would you say was your favorite episode of Voyager that you worked on? Like the one that you look back most and say that was like we really achieved something special there.
I thought the pilot was good, but I also liked the conclusion when we got into more with the Borg Queen and working with Kate and the challenges for the Borg Queen. And there was a scene where the Borg Queen was disassembled disassembled herself. And so when we were shooting that, we put pink cloth around where different appendages could be removed, so that the compositor could rotoscope accurately as she moved around with the pink cloth, because she could see the cloth, and then just put a CG cap on that so that you could see the kind of Borg electronics inside. But it was using old and new technology, wrapping pink cloth around somebody in front of so you could rotoscope, and then just shooting a clean plate. And the other thing was where we see the Borg Queen in an early episode assembled. You saw different parts come together, and I thought that was kind of fun. John Knoll did a wonderful job in one of the features where you see the Borg Queen being assembled, but I wanted to do something different for Voyager, and so the floor didn't really open. That was done using visual effects technology, and so that kind of stuff. It was not so much particular episode as particular types of shots that I thought were particularly fun to deal with.
And do you remember, by any chance, now look, there might be some of them, maybe there was none. Do you remember what the most challenging episode to work on was? For whatever reason it might have been timeline, maybe it was just the designs
Well,
weren't working in your head.
it was probably the pilot because we had so little time to do it, and there was so much work in it and a lot of location work.
And
So
an
I
actor
would,
change.
yeah, and a character change. Then there was one where we rented out the convention center in Los Angeles and used it for an underground alien city. And we hung big blue screens in different areas and stuff like that. Then the producers decided to change Kate Mulgrew's hairstyle, so we went back and reshot it.
Did they?
And
I think this is the first time I've ever heard of they changed Kate's hairstyle. I think she must have had about 19 different hairstyles in the first 3 episodes.
well, I have to talk to Kate about that details, but uh, and and I think I really enjoyed designing the Borg city toward the end, where you saw all these structures in
Yeah.
space.
Yep.
And how I did that is I made a very crude physical model with just cut up wood in my little workshop here at home and bamboo barbecue skewers to hold the wood together. And then I gave that to the CG guys because it would be easier for them to see it than rather than a two-dimensional sketch, they could rotate it around. And I said, well, the cube is 2 kilometers on the side and just extend this out for 300 miles. And
And Dan, in terms of say, when you were saying that you didn't have a whole lot of time for the Voyager pilot, is that because of work on Generations and DS9 still ongoing at the same time, or what was it?
uh, calendar dates,
Or
yeah, the due date.
oh my
And
word,
so,
that's
and we were still working on DS9 at the time. So it was, as I said earlier, time was our greatest enemy.
Yeah.
so. How did you break up the work then? Because obviously DS9 was still on for was it 2, 3 years after Voyager started, or however many years it was. Like, how did you break up the work then? So obviously you would have been getting like, would you been having getting 2 scripts a week kind of thing, or what would it, how would it kind of
Yeah,
work?
well, we broke the visual effects team into separate teams. So so each team would be a supervisor and a coordinator who would help keep track of everything, and then we had a visual effects associate on each series who would keep the teams going. And we would have 2 teams per series. That way, one team could be shooting motion control or compositing, while the other team was on set helping the crew and the director shoot the visual effect shots as needed. And so the 2 team system, which we evolved early on with Next Generation, where Rob Legato and I broke up into 2 teams. And then Rob worked with Gary Hutzel and I worked with Ron Moore as coordinators. And we had David Takamura as the associate who would just make sure neither team got in each other's way. And I think the 2 team system is what made that possible, that one team was always available to do what was needed at the moment.
And Dan, how much time then would like, or would you need to spend much time on set at all then overall?
It depended on the script. Some sets, either me or the associate or the supervisor would be on set, or usually both of us. And then I would frequently direct second unit when there was a big effect sequence. Sometimes one shot could take all day. Um, and other times, first unit wouldn't finish the show, so we'd do pickups of scenes that weren't finished, like in Blink of an Eye. There was a scene with Seven of Nine and Naomi, and they didn't get around to showing it, so I would direct those scenes. There's another one with Seven of Nine and the Doctor Bob Picardo walking down the hall and having a conversation where Seven of Nine is going to go off with somebody with Tuvok to do some task, and those would be pickup scenes. Then the other ones would be inserts where the editor would be cutting the show on the footage from first unit and say, well, I really need a close-up of pushing a button, and the so then we just do that in second unit. And there was one where we had giant viruses, and it was a fun scene with Kate Mulgrew where she's fighting with this big virus. So I painted a styrofoam ball blue so Kate could stab it, let go of the knife, and it would flutter down. And then I'd kind of poke around her head with the stinger on a stick. And Kate was so trusting.
That was the episode Macrocosm, I think.
Yeah, the macroviruses.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And Dan, did you enjoy doing the second unit directing? Because obviously we'd spoken before when you directed Birthright Part 2 and things like that. Did you have a desire to direct any episodes of Voyager?
Yeah, I would have loved to do it, but the producers felt that they didn't want me to be away for a month.
The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. There you go.
And Dan, what was the crew like to work with for doing your second unit directing and things like that?
Oh, they were great. What was really nice is that the stars of the show always treated me like they would treat any other director, and we had a second unit crew, and usually the director of photography in second unit would be the A camera operator on the first unit, but sometimes we would bring in outside directors of photography who knew the show. We were even able to bring in Jerry Finnerman, who was the director of photography on the original series.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And it was really fun to work with Jerry, and he was had an endless supply of stories about all the different shows and movies he worked on.
Oh, wow. So, Dan, obviously you did second unit directing. You obviously did second unit on Next Gen and DS9 as well, obviously in Enterprise too, right? Your phone's ringing. Go for it.
No, I'm getting a call from Germany, but I'm putting it. It's coming through my hearing aid, so I'm sorry.
Oh,
you're absolutely fine. Cheapers above. It's 20 past 9 over. It's 20 past 9 over in Germany at the moment. Good Lord.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Very late to be ringing you at this time of night, now, Dan, isn't it?
It's my friend Bernd Dessinger, who's the director of the Film Museum of Dusseldorf.
Very good, very good. So, Dan, obviously, as I said, you did do second unit directing on the Next Gen, DS9, Voyager, and Enterprise. Then, obviously, that's correct, isn't it?
Yes.
Which one did you enjoy doing second unit directing on most?
I'd say they were all about the same. It was same job, nice people. I think I enjoyed them more. I think the more I did, the more confident I became, and better time. And I really especially liked working with the stunt team on action sequences. Was really fun.
Especially with Dennis Mandalone as well, I'm guessing, in that situation.
Yeah, Dennis was always a joy to work with.
And Dan, as you look back on, say, Voyager at 30 and things like that, how do you feel about it that it's turning 30 years old? How do you look back on it?
I occasionally watch an old episode, and I look back and I think we did good work. Yeah. I think we were able to help provide a universe for these stories to take place in. I was really proud to have worked with the people I worked with, the teams at Motion Control, at Image-G, at the CG companies, working with the model makers, Tony and the great Craig Jean. So I had a great time. We were able to bring in some very noted pyrotechnic people to blow things up, which was kind of fun. So I look back and I think I'm proud of it. I'm proud of the relationships. I'm proud of the cohesion. Proud that we're all still friends.
Is there anything you would have done differently looking back on it?
Oh yeah, if I see an old episode, sometimes I grit my teeth. One of the biggest mistakes I made, which was on the macrophage show, is I didn't like how stars would bump from scan line to scan line in standard definition, and the cinematographer I know was shooting a beer commercial, and he said, "Well, I shoot the beer pours at 60 frames a second, so there's one film frame for each video uh, frame. There are
Yep.
two frames per frame as you're playing it back." And so I decided I would do that, and it looked remarkably clear, but it didn't look like it belonged in the show. So I would say that was the biggest mistake I made is this experiment that it just didn't look like part of the show. So I only did that once.
So what you're saying is, Dan, in your 7 years in Voyager, that is the worst mistake you made overall. Then is that correct?
Yeah, that's the worst mistake I made. And one story, Robbie McNeil, who's still a good friend, we worked on many projects after Star Trek. We were doing an episode in the holodeck where they go back to a Captain Proton, kind of like
Oh
a
yeah, yeah, yeah.
of the 1930s Republic serials.
Yep.
And I designed Captain's Proton ship from memory of what I remembered Flash Gordon's ship to look like. But by not looking it up, I knew it would be close enough, but not a complete steal. But we were doing a thing where Robbie was supposed to be flying, and we actually got the real jetpack from Commando Cody in the Lost Planet Airmen, and which, by the way, was Leonard Nimoy's first movie.
Yep.
He was one of the zombies of the stratosphere. At any rate, uh, we devised this big like a seesaw for Robbie to ride on, and he had a form-fitting fiberglass thing he could put under his costume that would hold him up. And Dick Brownfield got these industrial sparklers that he put inside the tubes of the jetpack. And luckily, Dick was smart enough to put Robbie in a racing driver's fireproof underwear. And so we're shooting the scene, and Robbie's flying around, and it's really cool. And then I notice Robbie's butt is on fire, so we had to cut the scene, run in with fire extinguishers, and put it out. And to show Robbie's quality as a person, he took it with such good spirit, never complained, never whined, never went after anybody, unlike our current president. And so I remember that as being a thing. And it's funny how it looked great when we put the shot together, but it was something that could have been a real tragedy and turned out to be, thanks to being prepared and thanks to Robbie's attitude, it became just a funny story we can talk about.
What's your probably outside of that memory, Dan? I was about to ask you that actually. What is probably your favorite behind the scenes story of working on Voyager outside of Robbie's burning pants, of course?
Well, I wouldn't say it's my favorite story, but on one of those all-night shoots, we were shooting on the bridge, and the visual effects shot wasn't coming up for a while, and I'd been awake for a long time, and so I decided to go into the captain's ready room, which is right off the bridge, and take a nap on the couch. And the next thing I know, Kate Mulgrew is shaking me, and I said, "What's the matter?" She said, "Dan, we can't shoot." I said, "Why is that?" She said, "You're snoring too loud."
Oh my God. Was she accurate with that, Dan? Are you a loud snorer?
I was.
Dan, looking back on it then, what do you think is your greatest contribution to Voyager?
Um, that's a really hard question. I don't
We
know
don't
that.
we don't ask you the easy questions here, Dan. We ask you the hard questions. You know that.
Okay. I think delivering consistent quality and helping keep the team inspired.
And what was your this is such a corporate question I'm about to ask. It's like I'm interviewing you for a position in my company or something. What was your management style like, Dan? Like, how did you keep everyone engaged? Shut up, Mike. Stop laughing at me, right? I'm very curious about this. What
Next,
was
you're
your
going to say,
management?
"Sell me this pen." No.
Well, you'll have to ask them, but relaxed, never be a martinet, kind of respect people's creativity, make sure that everybody had a sense of ownership of what they were doing, to never make changes to make it different, only make changes when I can justifiably say they would be better.
That's very good. That's very good altogether. And say, in terms of then say, look, with Voyager and looking back at it and things like that, how well do you think Voyager as a series has stood up now 30 years later after it started?
I think it's stood up. I think it got a slow start. I don't think it got the respect it deserved right from the beginning, which I never quite understood. But I think it holds up pretty well, primarily because we had a great cast, solid stories, um, and enough visual spectacle to keep the fans interested. And I think the visuals still hold up okay.
Yeah.
And but it's the stories, and that goes to our principal cast and our guest stars and the writers. That's where it all begins. Story is king.
Yep.
Mike?
Trying to think, is there anything else I want to ask you before I ask you the penultimate question?
Okay.
No, I think we've covered pretty much everything.
Everything we've got in terms of our questions, yeah.
I'm trying to think there's anything else that I want to know the answer to.
Okay.
Well,
That's good
Dan
because I
was.
probably can't provide it.
No, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. So I think then we'll go with the penultimate question.
Mhm.
Dan Curry, what does Star Trek mean to you?
Wow, that is an interesting question. That's um, to me, it what makes Star Trek the cultural phenomenon that it is that it promises a future that we can all share, a future where we've been able to go beyond poverty, where we've been able to go beyond racism, where uh, health issues have been conquered pretty much. And I think it's that promise of a future where humans have become comfortable with their technology, and the goal of people is not so much to become the richest person in the world, but to become the best version of yourself, and to kind of seek your follow your interests and follow your passions. And I think that's what the principal characters were like in each series, that they were passionate about exploring. Nobody was passionate about getting rich.
No.
They were passionate about discovering knowledge, seeing what's out there. To me, that's why Star Trek holds up and why a lot of the films that inspired Star Trek, like Forbidden Planet, was very influential on these visual effects artists of my generation. And I remember as a boy seeing that movie and realizing you could take models, paintings, cartoon animation, and people and make a reality on screen that can only exist on screen and nowhere else. And I thought I'd like to do that.
That's brilliant. I think we all kind of relate to that a bit, don't we?
Yep.
Dan, thank you so much for giving us some insights into Voyager and some of the out-of-the-box thinking that goes on in VFX, such as cheerleaders, pom-poms for force fields, which I still think is brilliant, but there we are. For everybody else watching and listening at home, remember you can catch up with more of us at our Patreon, patreon.com/Clonestar. But until next time, live long and prosper.